period of time that you were dating his sister?
Yes.
And how frequently would you see the defendant during those 9 or so months?
About every day.
You mentioned there were times when you would go down to his residence in Antioch, is that right?
Yes.
Were there times when he would come to your stepfather's residence here in Kenosha?
Yes.
How often would that occur?
Weekly.
What sort of things did the two of you like to do together?
Everything as a kid. Hanging out, going to the lake, hunting, going up north, just everything you would do growing up.
You mentioned hunting. Is that something that you and your family are interested in?
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
We own property in Ladysmith. Every year growing up, I would go there with my stepdad and my brother and go hunt ever since I was a little kid.
When you say hunt, what sort of things would you hunt?
Deer, turkey, pheasant, rabbit.
Can you describe your family's property in Ladysmith for us?
Yeah, it's about, I want to say 13 acres of land with somewhat we would call a shooting range, which is like a big open gravel pit, and it's pretty secluded and private in the woods.
Now you mentioned that the defendant was interested in hunting. Did you ever bring him along hunting up in Ladysmith?
I wouldn't say hunting. We did bring him once to go kind of just get a feel for hunting and shoot guns and just kind of get away for the weekend.
Do you remember when that was?
I would like to say a few months before everything happened.
If I said it was in early May, around May 1st of 2020, would that sound right to you?
Yes.
Now, do you remember a time in which you and the defendant were up in Ladysmith and there was some discussion about purchasing a gun?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
We were going up and we had stopped at a store that was local to buy like clay pigeons and ammo. Kyle had also wanted a gun similar to the one I had. He did not, or I did not have the money for it, so he said he would pay for it. I told him that wasn't a good idea. He wasn't 18, but we came to an agreement to where he could have it once he is 18. It would be kept at my house until then, so it kind of went on from there.
What kind of gun was this?
An AR-15.
Did you have one of those already?
Yes.
Did the defendant see that gun that you had?
Yes.
How did it come to be that he saw that gun?
Just from when I bought it, he had saw it at my house, or, just me opening it from the box.
And he indicated to you that he wanted a similar type gun?
Yes.
Did the defendant say anything to you about why he wanted such a gun?
No.
Now, you just mentioned the fact that the defendant was not 18. How old was he in May to August of 2020?
17.
And you discussed that he couldn't have a gun because he was 18. Is that something that you and the defendant actually talked about?
Yes.
Can you tell us about those discussions?
It was more along the lines of he would be 18 soon. I told him I didn't want to do it because I knew it wasn't, obviously he can't buy it legally. We did agree that it wouldn't be his until he was 18, and he was aware of that. And from then on, it did stay at my house.
So when you were up in Ladysmith, I think you said you went to a local store to purchase the gun. Is that correct?
Yes.
In whose name was the gun purchased?
Mine.
So you were the legal registered owner of the gun?
Yes.
Where did the money come from to get that gun?
Kyle.
After the gun was purchased in Ladysmith, did the defendant use it?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
We just target practiced. We bought a pretty good amount of ammo and just shot clay pigeons, and just went into the woods on our property.
Now, you mentioned earlier there was some sort of, I think you said a shooting range on the property. Is
Yes.
that right? Can you describe that for us, please?
It's about 250 yards long. It's an old gravel pit that they used to use to obviously get gravel. It kind of just turned into the shooting range for us as a big open field.
Did you and the defendant shoot your AR-15s on that shooting range?
Yes.
You mentioned it was about 250 yards long. Did you have targets that far away?
Not entirely. It was, more at the time it was just like iron sights, so that wasn't a realistic range to shoot. We would set up clay pigeons hanging on trees at the end of the range and just kind of walk a certain amount of distance until we felt comfortable it was the right spot.
What would you say the farthest distance away would be that you shot targets at with your guns?
Say about 75 yards.
Were you successful in hitting what you were shooting at?
Not all the time.
I'm going to ask the detectives here to show you a couple of exhibits that have been marked as exhibits 27 and 28. And I'm going to have them handle them for safety purposes, but I'm going to have them hold them up and show them to you, and I'm going to ask you if you can identify them for us, okay?
Okay.
And I want to represent to everyone that these items are not loaded. There are no bullets or anything like that. I believe that Detective Antaramian is holding up what is been marked as exhibit number 27. Detective, is that right? That's number 27?
27.
Okay. Do you recognize that item, Mr. Black?
Yes.
What is that?
One of the AR-15s.
Do you know which one that is?
I believe it's Kyle's. I'm not too sure.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that yours and the defendant's look very similar to one another?
Yes.
Do you remember if there are any particular markings on one or the other that would help you to identify them?
The only difference was the sights.
What was the difference in the sights?
One of us had a bigger one. I don't remember which one it was.
Okay. I'll have the detective now show you the next exhibit, which is exhibit number 28. Detective Antaramian is now showing you another item, which is exhibit number 28. Do you recognize that?
Not from the last time I've seen both of them, no.
Okay. And I noticed that the gun that he's holding up doesn't appear to have a scope on it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are AR-15s the type of weapon where a scope could be added to them if need be?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Detective. Okay. Could you grab that, please? Detective Antaramian indicates there's a scope in the box, so we're going to show that to you as well. Maybe we could show Mr. Black both of the scopes, and you could tell us if you recognize which one might be yours. So, I believe Detective Antaramian is showing you one of the scopes. Are you able to recognize if that's yours or the defendant's?
That is not mine.
Okay. So that scope came, you believe, from the defendant's gun?
Yes.
Okay. And if you recall, thank you, Detective, the other weapon that we had that had a scope on it, now that you've seen this other scope, does that help you remember which gun was which?
Yes.
Okay. The other gun that we showed you, which is Exhibit 27 with the scope attached on it, was that your gun?
Yes.
Okay. So these two exhibits, 27 and 28, are, 27 is the first one is your AR-15, and the second one is the defendant's. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move exhibits 27 and 28 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. Received.
Can you help us understand, Mr. Black, why you were interested in having an AR-15?
I kind of wanted like a personal project. I had mostly only had hunting guns, and I wanted to try something new to target shoot. I have a lot of family with guns like that. They kind of find it a hobby to build them up and put different attachments on them, so I figured I would try and get into it as well.
How long had you owned that AR-15?
I want to say 2-3 months.
Before May or before August?
Before May.
Okay. And in that time period, had you made any modifications or additions to the gun?
Just the scope.
I assume if life had kept going forward like normal, you would have continued to do so?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about the night of August 25th. Other than that night, was there ever a time in which you went out in Kenosha holding or carrying that AR-15?
No.
How would you normally store or carry around that weapon if you did?
In my arms. I mean, if I'm driving, it would be, disassembled in the back of the car, unloaded.
Maybe I was not clear on my question. I believe you said that up until the night of August 25th, you hadn't went out armed with that AR-15 in Kenosha. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
When you did have it with you in Kenosha, was it disassembled in the trunk of your car?
On the way there, yes, but once we had arrived, no.
Where did you normally keep your gun on a daily basis?
Locked up inside the house,
Whereabouts inside the house?
in the safe,
Where was that safe located?
in my dad's room.
Did you have a key to that safe?
No,
Who did?
my dad.
When you wanted to get your AR-15, did you have to get your dad's permission?
Yes,
And just so we're clear, when you say dad, that's technically your stepdad?
yes.
Okay. So, for example, in May, when you went up to Ladysmith with the defendant, who all came along with you?
It was me, Kyle, my brother Ray, my friend Cody, and Kyle's sister.
Do you remember approximately how long you spent up there?
I want to say it was the weekend.
When you went up there, I assume you brought your AR-15.
Yes.
Did anyone else bring any other guns along with them?
Yes, we also brought like a 12-gauge hunting shotgun, and then I think my friend brought his little .22 pistol.
And I think you said earlier that your dad, your stepdad, and your brother were also interested in hunting?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many rounds you and the defendant would have fired off at that firing range up at the property in Ladysmith when you were there that weekend?
A lot, I would say 100, 200.
May I approach, Your Honor? Mr. Black, I'm going to show you a document which has been marked as exhibit number 7. Do you recognize the photograph on that document?
Yes.
Who is shown in that photograph?
Kyle?
Was that a photograph that was taken when you and the defendant were up in Ladysmith around May 1st of 2020?
Yes.
Does that photograph show the defendant holding his AR-15?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move exhibit number 7 into evidence.
Is there objection? No. Received.
May I publish that to the jury, Your Honor, on the screens?
You may.
Sometimes these TVs are too smart for us. Could you turn that one on too, Natalie? And then could you look for number 1, please? Sorry, I'll do it. Mr. Black, do you recall what day that photograph was taken when you were up there?
I want to say the same day we arrived.
Does that photograph show in the background there the property that your family had up in Ladysmith?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember who it was who actually took that photograph?
Yes.
Who was it?
My friend Cody.
Do you remember if that was before or after you and the defendant went to the firing range and
This is before.
practiced? Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, after you and the defendant returned to Kenosha from Ladysmith, and the defendant, that you purchased this gun for the defendant, what happened to the gun after that?
It was locked up in the safe.
Which safe is that?
The one in the garage. It was the one that required a code to open.
That's the garage at your father's place?
Yes.
Here in Kenosha?
Yes.
Stepfather? I'm going to use that interchangeably, but technically that's your stepfather, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Did you have a code to open that safe?
No.
Who did?
Only my stepdad.
So the defendant didn't either.
No.
Why didn't the defendant take that AR-15 back to Antioch with him?
Because we had an agreement that he wouldn't do that.
What was the reason why?
He was 17.
Was the defendant accepting of that? Did he understand that?
Yes.
Do you recall having any discussions with his mom about that?
Not me personally.
I want to talk about the time period between when you came back from Ladysmith in early May and the night of August 25th, 2020. In that period of time, did the defendant ever possess that AR-15?
No.
On the day of August 25th, 2020, the day when all this stuff happened, did he possess that gun?
Yes.
How did it come to be that he gained possession of that gun on August 25th?
My dad had took a lot of the weapons we had out of the safe due to all the rioting and stashed them inside the house in case somebody were to come break into our house. And that gun happened to be one of those weapons.
Do you know how the defendant took possession of it that day?
I do not. All I'm aware of is that it was downstairs.
When did you first see the defendant with that weapon that day?
When I was in the kitchen. So about, I want to say, a few hours before we left.
And tell us what you saw when you were in the kitchen.
I saw him coming up the stairs with it.
With the AR-15?
Yes.
Did you hear him ask you permission to take that gun?
No.
Did you hear him ask permission from your father?
No.
When the defendant came upstairs with that gun, what, if anything, did he do with it?
I believe he set it down on the table and started looking for medical supplies.
What do you mean by medical supplies?
Like bandages, rubbing alcohol, certain things like that.
Do you know why he was doing that?
Yes, in case somebody was hurt downtown.
We've seen some photographs that night of the defendant with a bag that looks like a medic bag. Do you remember him having that night?
Yes.
On that night? Do you know what was in that bag?
All the medical supplies that he was gathering.
Were those medical supplies gathered from your house?
Yes.
Do you know if the defendant got any medical supplies from Walgreens or any other store or anything like that, or was it just all from your house?
I know there wasn't any from any store, but I'm unaware of anything that happened after we had got to the lake.
Okay. So I believe you described that the defendant took the gun into the kitchen, put it on the table. He was gathering some medical supplies. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
What happened after that?
We proceeded to get ready, and then we went down to the lake.
When you say we, who do you mean?
Me and Kyle.
Where did you go when you went down by the lake?
At first we had parked by a friend's house, and then we walked to, I want to say, the back parking lot of Ruther.
And what did you do there?
We met up with our friend Nick, and then we proceeded to go to the car source locations.
When you say Nick, do you mean Nick Smith?
Yes.
When you say car source locations, we've heard some testimony about 3 different locations. Can you help us to understand which one you're talking about?
The first one we went to was the one that would be closest to us right now, so further south.
I apologize, I was a little distracted there. Can you tell me again, which was the first one you went to?
The one that was further south.
63rd and Sheridan, does that
Yes.
sound right? And when you say we went there, was that the defendant, you and Nick Smith?
Yes.
What happened then?
Then we met the owner once again, and he gave us a ride to the north location and dropped us off.
Okay, I'm sorry. You say you met the owner once again. When was the first time that you met him?
Previously in the day, I want to say it was around morning time when we were cleaning up all the graffiti.
So maybe I've jumped around a little bit, so I want to make things clear. If I could have just 1 second.
Go ahead. Is it marked?
It's not yet. Let's start. I apologize, it's my fault. I kind of jumped in the middle of the day. So I want to start at the beginning of that day. That was Tuesday, August 25th, 2020, the day that all these things happened. So let me back up for a little bit so we can kind of go in chronological order. I think it's easier for everybody to follow. The night, Monday night into Tuesday, did you stay at your own home?
Yes.
Did the defendant stay there as well?
I do not recall.
Do you remember when the first time would have been that you would have seen him on Tuesday morning?
I don't know specifically what time, but it was before noon.
When you saw him, was it at your house?
Yes.
What happened when you first saw him? What did the two of you do?
Me, him, and my brother Ray decided to go down to the lake and kind of just look at how things were, and then from there on we decided to help clean.
When you say you went down to the lake, do you mean the actual beach lakefront, or do you mean downtown?
Downtown.
Where did you go when you went downtown the first time?
We parked right next to the car source location that had already been burnt down, and then we walked across Sheridan to Luther.
I'm gonna, may I approach, Your Honor? I have a map here of the area, and I'm gonna try and prop it in such a way that we can all see it. I wish I had an easel, but I don't right now. Mr. Black, I'll be a human easel for a moment. This shows the area of downtown beginning on the north at 58th Street and going down to the south at 63rd Street. Sorry, Karen. And the area along Sheridan Road there. Do you see that, Mr. Black?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
I'm going to ask you that, what happened to our easel, do we know?
Well,
Is it
maybe
back here?
upstairs.
Okay, and then put it, because right now the defendant can't see it, and I'm required to ensure that he does, and also I can't see it either. Now, and then also, once we get that, then,
okay. Which way, is that okay? Can we
we're
wait
waiting
that?
for the easel.
Yeah.
You can continue with examination on something else,
It's
or you
right
can
here.
wait. There we are. Put it back so that the defendant can see it.
Or up there.
Can we maybe
Or up
angle
there.
it up there?
That's
Would that be
actually what
okay?
we use.
Yeah.
Yeah, use that.
There's a button here to push, so maybe we do some marking here in a sec. Okay, thank you, Judge. This makes it a lot easier. Mr. Black, I put a little laser pointer right in front of you there. Could you use that and show us on this map? I'm going to focus in on the first time you say you came down with the defendant. And I think you said, was there anyone else with you the first time, or was it just the two of you?
No, it was me, him, and my brother.
Okay.
There's another if you like. No, then you could
Oh.
if you want.
Yeah.
Or you can use the one Sister Mercy Ann gave me.
I don't want to be accused of using a dangerous weapon, so I'll use the laser pointer here. So, thank you. Sure, I know how to turn it on now. Oh, there's the button. Okay. Could you please use that laser pointer and show us on this map? You said you parked near one of the car source locations when you first came down.
Yes.
Can you point out where that was?
About right. I would say right here.
And for the record, you are pointing to an area that is, I believe, on 59th Street, just east of Sheridan Road. Is that correct?
Yes.
And on this map, there's a label there of one of the car source locations at that intersection, at that corner. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. You described one of the car source locations as one that had been affected by the events of the previous night, and I'm not sure what word you exactly used, but can you describe for us when you were at that particular car source location, which is on the northeast corner of 59th and Sheridan, what did you observe?
Every car was burnt to ash. There was a lot of garbage and graffiti everywhere.
Now, there's a structure on that property, an office of some sort. Did you observe that office as well?
Yes, it was burnt down.
Did you look inside?
No.
Is it fair to say that every car in that lot was burned to the chassis almost?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated you parked near there and looked at that location. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did you do next?
From then we walked to, which is now Harborside.
And on that map, can you show us where that would be?
I don't know if it's on the map exactly, but it would be more south up there.
When you say south, you mean actually north?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So you're talking about the area near Ruther High School?
Yes.
Which would be right across the square from where we're at right now?
Yes.
And why was it that you walked in that direction?
We noticed there's people cleaning the graffiti, and that was my old school, so we decided to go help.
Did you help?
Yes.
And what did you do to help?
Scrub the walls.
Did the defendant help as well?
Yes.
And how much time did you spend doing that?
I want to say 2 hours, about 2.5 hours.
Did you have any supplies on your own to use to clean, or did people already have some?
They had some. I personally left by myself to go get sandpaper, and then I came back to try it.
I've never tried to clean graffiti off a wall. How does it work?
Not very well.
Well, I appreciate your efforts. What happened then after that?
From then we went back to the house and went home.
So you got back in your car and drove back to your house?
Yes.
And your brother came along?
Yes.
What happened then?
From then, that's when we ended up getting the guns.
Now, we talked earlier about a time in which the defendant came upstairs into the kitchen with his gun. He started to gather some medical supplies. Are we at that point in the chronology?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure I've got everything in order. Then let's go forward from there. What happened after the defendant was gathering medical supplies? He had the gun in the kitchen. What happened then?
As soon as we were ready, we went down to the lake, and that's when we parked at Nick Smith's house.
And I don't know if it is on that map or not. Is his house located somewhere in that area?
Yeah, it's not on the map, but it would be if the map was up more.
Okay.
Can I hear you, sir?
If the map was up
If
more?
the map were up more, yes.
Okay. So your friend Nick Smith lives somewhere near this area. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, behind Ruther.
Okay. And you went to his house. Is that right?
Yes.
Who came with you?
Just me and Kyle.
Did you have your guns?
Yes.
Did you have any ammunition for your gun?
Yes.
You personally?
Yes.
Do you know if the defendant did?
Yes.
We've had some discussions at various points already in this case about a strap or some sort of device for retaining the gun. Did you have that type of item with you?
Yes.
And did the defendant?
Yes.
Do you know how those were, how you acquired those?
Yes, from Jelensky's.
When did you do that?
I want to say the middle of that day, in between us getting back from cleaning up graffiti and before we left.
So earlier you described coming down, looking at the burnt out car source location, going over to Harborside or Ruther and cleaning up some graffiti, and then leaving the downtown area. Is
Yes.
that right? Is that when you went to Jelensky's?
We did stop at the house first, and then I believe it was like an hour until we did go to Jelensky's.
When you say we, who all went to Jelensky's?
Just me and Kyle.
What was your purpose in going there?
To get a sling,
Why did you want a sling?
so we didn't have to hold it the entire time we were walking.
Do you recall if you and the defendant both got the same kind of sling?
Yes, we did.
Who actually went in and purchased the sling?
Kyle.
And after that, leaving Jelensky's, did you then go back home again?
Yes.
And that's when you acquired, or the defendant acquired the gun and the medical supplies?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that, you said you came back down to the lakefront. Is that right?
Yes.
Where did you go when you came back?
We went to Nick Smith's, and then we met him at the Ruther parking lot, and from then on we walked to the car's first location.
Now, I want to stop you for a second because you made a mention earlier of the owner of CarSource. Do you know that person's name?
I believe his name was Sam.
When, if at all, did you encounter him on that particular day?
We encountered him twice that day. The first time when we were cleaning graffiti, on our way back to the car, when we were leaving, we stopped and talked to him. And then after we had met with Nick later that day, he had brought us to CarSource to meet with him again.
So let's talk about the first time. You described cleaning graffiti at Ruther, which is kind of at the north end of this map. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And then you encountered this Sam on your way back to your car, which I believe you said was parked at 58th and Sheridan by that first CarSource location.
Yes.
Where in that process did you physically meet Sam?
On the corner next to CarSource, not the one that had originally got burnt down, but the next one over across the street.
Can you please use your pointer to show us where that was?
About right at the corner right there.
You're pointing to the southwest corner of the intersection of 59th and Sheridan, is that right?
Yes.
Now, did you, at this particular moment when you were meeting with Sam that day, did you observe the condition of that particular car source location?
Yes.
How did it appear to you?
It wasn't entirely destroyed, but there were some cars that were damaged.
When you say damaged, what did the damage look like?
Like kicked in doors and hoods and shattered windshields.
Did there appear to be any fire damage?
No.
What about the building? Did you make any observations of that?
It was just boarded up.
Okay. And when you talked to Sam that first time, this first conversation, what did you talk about?
We basically just talked about the defamation that he had in his last, the one that had actually burned down, and how much money he lost, and how deeply he would be in case all his other buildings did burn down.
And was there anything more that you talked about with him?
We did exchange phone numbers in case he needed any help.
Did you feel at that point like you wanted to help him?
I mean, my help was definitely there, but I didn't offer any help at that point.
Do you know if the defendant did?
I'm unaware.
And when you say exchange phone numbers with Sam, did you personally give him your number?
Yes.
Do you know if the defendant did?
Yes.
And then you said, we're going to fast forward a little bit because we've covered some of the intervening time period. You said at some point you came back down later, you parked at Nick Smith's house, and I think you said you went to the Ruther parking lot?
Yes.
And then at some point you said you went down to Car Source, is that right?
Yes.
Which Car Source did you go to after you left the Ruther parking lot?
The one that would be closest to Ruther,
Okay.
on the same side of Sheridan.
Is it that same one we were just talking about on the southwest corner of 59th and Sheridan?
Yes.
Now, do you recall approximately what time of day it was that you came back downtown?
I'd say around 5 p.m.
And you and the defendant both had your guns with you,
Yes.
and those straps,
Yes.
and I believe you said you had ammo too?
Yes.
Okay. When you met with Nick Smith in the Ruther parking lot, was there anyone else there besides the three of you?
There was some other people that we didn't know that had also showed up.
And from there, you said you walked to the Car Source at 59th and Sheridan?
Yes.
Why did you go there?
We were kind of just following Nick. About halfway there, we found out that we were meeting the owner Sam again.
Did you actually meet the owner Sam again?
We met his brother, so the other owner.
Where physically on that map, can you use the pointer to show us where you actually met with the brother?
Right there.
So you're pointing again to that same Car Source at 59th and Sheridan
Yes.
on the southwest corner?
Yes.
Was, when you met with him, do you remember, were you in the building? Were you outside?
We were outside.
Okay. Do you remember what you talked about?
We just talked about pretty much how to get in if we needed to, and then Nick had brought up if there was any way to get on the roof, and if there was any keys we needed to get inside.
Why were you having this discussion with the brother at that time?
Pretty much just to know where to stand, to make sure that a lot of us were safe and what we were allowed to do, and if we were allowed to go inside the building in case something happened.
So it sounds like there was some discussion of physically staying at that location.
Yes.
Why?
That's one of the locations we didn't want to end up burning down.
Was it your intention then to stay and protect that Car Source location?
Yes.
Was that something that the defendant was also planning to do, as far as you know?
Yes.
What about Nick Smith? Him too?
Yes.
Now, when the three of you, the defendant, and Nick Smith meet with this brother at that Car Source at that time, was there anyone else involved in protecting that location at that time?
Just the people we had previously met with at Ruther. They weren't exactly in the conversation with who was going where at the time.
What happened after you met with the brother at that Car Source?
Me, Kyle, and Nick had got a ride from the brother to the, I want to say, south location, and then he had dropped us off there.
Could you please use your laser pointer to show us on the map where the south location is that you're talking about? And you're pointing to the Car Source location that is at the northwest corner of 63rd and Sheridan, is that right?
Yes.
And you said the brother gave you a ride in his car down there?
Yes.
When you got down there, did the brother stick around or did he leave?
He stayed for about 30 minutes and then he left.
Did you meet with anyone else down there?
Yeah, that's when a lot of people that we didn't really know had came from out of town and other cities to come help.
As you sit here today, do you remember the names of any of those people?
Very few.
What was going to be the plan for that night?
The plan was to have a decent amount of us split up between the two locations and then kind of stay there to make sure nothing bad happened.
Which location were you going to go to?
The one closest to Ruther.
The one up at 59th?
Yes.
What about the defendant?
He was going with me.
So the two of you were going to be assigned to protect the 59th Street car source.
Yes.
Was there another group that was going to be assigned to guard the 63rd Street car source?
Yes.
Do you know who any of those people were?
No.
Were those people there in person when you guys were making these plans?
Yes.
So as far as you could tell, everybody understood who was going to be at one location and who was going to be at the other?
Yes.
What did you do next?
Then we walked to the car source location closest to Ruther.
Once you got there, is that where you personally stayed for the rest of the night?
Yes.
And again, you had your gun,
Yes.
and the defendant had his as well.
Yes.
Tell us about what you did when you were at 59th Street car source.
I had climbed the ladder and got on the roof of the building to kind of just watch out for people, and that's kind of where I stayed all night.
Why did you decide to go up on the roof?
I kind of didn't want to be in the mix of a lot of problems. I didn't want to, I didn't want to get hurt. I didn't want to cause any problems. I figured it would be a lot safer up on top.
Why did you bring your gun?
In case something bad did happen and I needed to protect myself.
When you say something bad happened, what were you worried about happening?
Anything. Being shot at, somebody coming up on the roof. I mean, there's a ladder in the back, so anybody could get up. Anything.
So if someone climbed up on the roof, were you going to use that gun?
Not really. I mean, it depends what they were doing.
You talked about not wanting to be on the ground because of your concern about things happening on the ground. Did you feel that if you stayed on the ground, you would be in greater danger?
Yes.
Why was that?
People could easily get access to hurting me or coming up closer to me.
When you say people, who were you
Anyone.
worried about?
Anyone riding, anybody that was there for the wrong intentions.
So what got it in your mind that night that you felt there would be people out on the street that would want to hurt you if you were down on the ground?
I had heard about the previous night and how it was, and I knew that there was a lot of people fighting each other and a lot of violence. So I felt it would be best that I went there, if I was going to go there, making sure that I could protect myself if I needed to.
But you were also there to protect the car source location.
Yes.
How were you going to do that from up on the roof?
I'm helping anybody else that was there. I'm spotting people that were throwing things.
And then what? If you see somebody throwing something, you had a gun, were you planning on shooting them?
No. I mean, when somebody sees a weapon, they're not going to want to start any problems, obviously. If I see somebody with a weapon, I'm not going to want to initiate a problem.
Was it part of your thought process that night that by having the type of weapon you did, that it would deter others from attacking you?
That's fair to say.
Were there others in your group at 59th Street Car Source besides the defendant who were similarly armed?
Yes.
How many?
Everybody except for one person.
And when you say everybody, how many people are we talking about?
6 or 7.
So it's fair to say that there were, other than you and the defendant, there were another 6 or 7 people that were all carrying AR-15 type weapons.
Yes.
When you were up on the roof that night, what observations, if any, did you make about the crowd and what was going on the ground?
There's a lot of violence, a lot of screaming, a lot of people throwing things. You could definitely tell that people weren't just there for the reason they were. It wasn't a safe place to be at all.
Now, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the timing of that evening. And I'll represent to you that at some point in the evening there were crowds right out front of this courthouse and then there were crowds that were pushed south on Sheridan. Do you remember anything like that?
Yes.
Can you tell us in your own words, when you first got to CarSource at 59th Street, was there a lot of people out in front of the building on the street?
No.
Did that change?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Later through on the night, the crowd got pushed back closer and closer to us.
And we say pushed back. Who was pushing them back?
The police.
And how were they doing that?
With the big trucks and a lot of rubber bullets and.
The crowd that was being pushed back, what was their behavior like when they passed in front of your location?
Very violent. Very upset.
When you say violent, can you give us examples of the type of violence you saw?
Saying a lot of threats, throwing a lot of things, a lot of things along the lines of that.
And when you say they would say a lot of threats, who were those threats directed at?
Us, the police, sometimes even people in the crowd.
Do you have any idea why the people out on the street would make any threats to your group?
I have no idea.
Did you ever see anyone actually injured as a result of any of this violence that you've talked about?
No.
Did you see anyone shoot at anyone else?
No.
Did you ever consider using your gun to shoot at anyone?
No.
Was there a time in which you and the other members of your group observed people on the lot to the north of that location, which is marked on that map as St. James Church? Was there a time when you saw that?
Yes.
Okay. And could you just use your laser pointer and point at that St. James Church for us, please? Okay, and that's on the north side of 59th, on the northwest corner of 59th and Sheridan. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, 59th. Now, on this map, which is a printout from a satellite, there's a structure there next to St. James Church. Was that structure standing on the night of August 25th, 2020?
No.
What was the condition of that lot?
A bunch of rubble and concrete blocks.
Now, I asked you about whether you saw folks on that lot, and I believe you said you did. Is that right?
Yes.
What did you observe about those people?
They were obviously hiding. It was pitch black outside. We couldn't see anything besides a lot of shadows hiding behind the rocks.
What action, if any, did you and the other members of your group take as a result of seeing those people hiding?
We all started yelling, telling them to stop hiding and to go away.
Did you take any physical action with your gun towards them?
We were ready in case they did have guns.
And when you say you were ready, what exactly did you do with your gun?
We had aimed them
You would point your gun at those people?
in the direction.
Did the defendant do that?
I am unaware.
You didn't see the defendant point his gun at those people?
No, I was looking at the construction site.
And you said you saw people hiding and you didn't know whether they had guns or not?
Not until the very end.
What did you see in the very end?
As soon as they did come from hiding, they started running, and I noticed one of the people did have a gun.
What type of gun?
It looks like a similar weapon to the one me and Kyle had.
When you say you saw them running, where were they running?
They were running, I want to say west towards the lake across Sheridan.
And you said it was dark. You said you eventually saw them with a gun. When they were in that lot north of you, did you see anyone point a gun at you?
No.
Did you see anyone with a gun at that particular moment?
No.
Did anyone fire any shots?
No.
And I believe you said earlier, during this entire evening, you stayed up on the roof the whole time.
Yes.
Did you ever get down and wander off that 59th Street lot to go anywhere else?
No.
We have heard in this case, after the fact, that there were some individuals out on the street that night whose names are Anthony Huber, Joseph Rosenbaum, Gage Grosskreutz. I assume as you sit here today, you're familiar with those names.
Yes.
On that particular night, had you ever met any of those people before?
No.
Did you know any of their names?
No.
Have you since seen photographs of those people so you know what they look like?
Yes.
Thinking back to that night, Did you see any of them?
No.
Do you have any memory of seeing Joseph Rosenbaum that night?
No.
Do you have any memory of seeing Anthony Huber that night?
No.
Do you have any memory of seeing Gage Grosskreutz that night?
No.
Now, I asked you a little bit about what you observed of the crowd on the street in front of this location. Where was the defendant when that crowd was going by? Do you know?
Around the Ultimate gas station?
Was there a time in which the defendant was at 59th Street when there were protesters out in front of that location?
59th Street.
Your car source location?
I want to say previously right before.
Right before what?
Right before they had got to us.
Okay. What, if anything, did you observe the defendant doing during that time?
I noticed that as soon as they did get to us, there was somebody that was hurt, and he went and helped them and brought them back into the building. And then as soon as they were all like bandaged up, he brought them out.
Do you know what sort of injury they had suffered?
I do not.
And when you say you saw them go into the building, did you actually see with your own eyes them enter the building?
Yes.
And the supplies that the defendant had in his medic bag or something, did those all come from your residence?
Yes.
Now, there came a time in which the defendant was involved in some shootings that night, and we know that. What I want to ask is, what do you remember about that time period that we now know was the time of the shootings?
I remember that one of us had received information that one of the car source dealerships was being vandalized, or people were trying to burn it down. Kyle was not able to make it back to us, our location, so either me or Nick called him and told him about what was happening, and then the last I saw of him was him running towards that direction, and then from then on I just heard gunshots.
Now, you said you heard some information about the 63rd Street car source. Where did that information come from?
I'm unaware of that.
And you said somebody received that information. Do you recall if that was you personally who received that information?
I don't exactly know if it was me or Nick.
And you said somebody contacted the defendant. Was that over the phone?
Yes.
Do you recall who that was?
I do not.
You've given a statement about this night already to the police, is that right?
Yes.
And you and I have talked previously with your attorney, Mr. Cotton, who's in the second row with the purple tie, about this situation, right?
Yes.
At no point did you mention to the police that you were the one who called the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at no point have you mentioned in our meetings that you were the one who called the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes.
You said you saw the defendant heading down, and then you heard some gunshots. What is the next thing you remember about the defendant after that?
I didn't believe the gunshots were actually his until I got a phone call. And I answered it, and he just said, I shot somebody, and then hung up right away.
When did you see him next after that?
I want to say just a few minutes right after that.
Was that back at 59th Street?
Yeah, that was at the original location.
What observations, if any, did you make about the defendant when you saw him?
He was freaking out. He was really scared. He was pale, sweating a lot. You could tell he was just scared.
Did he say anything?
He wasn't really talking. He just said he had to do it. It was self-defense. People are trying to hurt him.
Did he ever say to you that someone was trying to attack him with a gun?
No.
Did he ever say to you that someone was trying to attack him with a knife?
No.
Did he ever say to you that anyone was trying to attack him with any sort of weapon?
No.
What happened after that?
After that, we kind of all tried to calm him down. There was some people yelling, but we kind of made the idea that he should turn himself in, but we couldn't do it in the one in Kenosha because there's people rioting at the front doors. So I took him home, and then we decided he should go turn himself in at the nearest police department.
When you say you took him home, did that mean you drove back down to Antioch?
Yes.
When you got down there, was anyone else at the defendant's residence?
No.
How long was it before anyone came back?
I want to say 5 to 10 minutes.
And who all came back at that point?
The rest of his family.
And that would be his mother and his two sisters?
Yes.
Was there any discussion at that time about what the defendant should do?
Leave, get out of town.
To where?
One of their family's properties in either Michigan or West Virginia.
What was your reaction to that?
Said no, he should turn himself in.
Were you urging the defendant to not flee, but instead to go turn himself in?
Yes.
Did he follow your advice?
Yes.
A couple more things, Mr. Black. Do you know what the defendant's occupation was around the time of August of 2020?
A lifeguard at the Rexplex.
We've seen some videos. I'll represent to you that at various points on that evening, the defendant tells people that he is an EMT. Do you know anything about that?
I know he has some training in that type of field, but that's kind of the most of my knowledge.
Do you know whether he had ever worked as a paramedic?
No.
Do you know whether he'd ever worked as an EMT?
No.
Now, you have talked about the fact that there was an understanding between you and the defendant that because he was 17 years old, he could not legally possess a firearm. Is that correct?
Yes.
The jury has been told, I'll represent to you, that there's a charge against the defendant in this case for possession of a weapon by someone under the age of 18. Has the person who provided the gun to the defendant, which was used to kill other people, are you facing criminal charges?
Yes.
In fact, have I not personally drafted a criminal complaint against you, charging you with 2 felony counts of providing that gun to the defendant, which were used to kill 2 separate people? Is that correct?
Yes.
And that is a case, a criminal case, that I'm prosecuting that is still pending. Is that right?
Yes.
As a criminal defendant in that case, are you aware of the fact that you have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and not answer any questions about any of that?
Yes.
Have you decided today to come in front of this jury and tell us the truth about everything,
Yes.
despite your Fifth Amendment right?
Yes.
Have I made any promises to you about what might happen in your criminal case in exchange for your testimony today?
No.
You have an attorney here, Mr. Cotton, who is your attorney in that case. Is that right?
Yes.
I wanted to confer, see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. Just a couple more things, Mr. Black, that I've neglected to mention. You mentioned that you observed that the defendant was pale and sweaty, I think you said freaking out when he came back from the shootings that night. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you see any injuries on him?
There was some red marks on his head, but besides that, no.
Did he say anything to you about any injuries that he suffered?
Just that his head hurt.
Finally, at one point in the evening, there's some indication on some videos that there might have been some folks behind the 59th Street car source, maybe throwing some rocks or something like that. Do you remember anything about that?
Yes.
What do you remember about that?
Out of nowhere, there was like people behind us in the neighborhood throwing rocks at us on top of the roof.
What, if anything, did you do about that?
Tried to dodge them.
You had a gun, correct?
Yes.
Did you think about using that to defend yourself?
No.
Why not?
So they were just rocks. I mean, they were throwing them from a distance, so I didn't really feel like I was in like great bodily harm or being hurt.
Do you remember if the defendant said or did anything in reaction to those folks?
No.
I have nothing further.
No,
Thank you.
he didn't, or no, I don't remember.
No, he didn't.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Cross-exam?
Yes, please. We need a bigger podium. Space. Dominic, excuse me, Mr. Black, I apologize. You knew Kyle Rittenhouse through his sister, Mackenzie.
Yes.
And when you were 18, 19, you were dating Mackenzie.
Yes.
And you and Kyle were good friends.
Yes.
And you referred to each other as brothers.
Yes.
Okay. And you talked about Kyle taking the gun out of your father's basement without permission. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And so up until that point, according to your testimony, you knew nothing about Kyle taking the gun down to Car Source that night.
No, I was definitely aware of it. Kind of never really went into the inside my mind. I never really clicked that, you know, like, hey, he shouldn't have that.
No, what I'm getting at is whether it clicked at that point or not, it's your testimony to these 20 people from Kenosha County that you didn't know about it until he brought it up from the basement on August 25th.
Oh, yes.
You agree with that statement?
Yes.
Okay. Then, can you tell me why earlier in the date you guys did go to Jelensky's, correct?
Yes.
You drove to Jelensky's.
Well, this was after he had brought the gun up.
That's not what your testimony was on direct examination.
That's how it went.
Okay, so he brings the gun up, you go to Jelensky's, and then go right downtown. That's what your testimony is on cross-examination.
Yes.
Okay. Whose idea was it to go to Jelensky's?
I don't recall.
But you said Kyle went into Jelensky's alone.
Yes.
And you don't know why he was going into Jelensky's?
I knew why he was going in there.
Okay, why?
To get a sling.
Okay. And then out of the goodness of his heart, he bought you one?
The plan was for both of us to get one.
Okay. So you knew he was going there to get slings, correct?
Yes.
You didn't tell him not to bring the gun, correct?
No.
Now, Kyle Rittenhouse's gun this is your gun, correct?
Legally, yes.
And this is an optic on the top of that gun, correct?
Yes.
This optic, does it shoot a laser beam out of it?
Not out of it. I mean, it projects one inside of it, yes.
Right, but if I were to point this gun, and obviously I can't do it here in a courtroom, but if I were to point this gun at you from here, there would be no red or green dot on your chest.
No.
This is the optic from Kyle Rittenhouse's gun. Do you need to see it?
No.
Do you agree that this is?
Yes.
This does not project a laser dot on you either, correct?
No.
So if someone said Kyle Rittenhouse put a laser from his weapon on their chest, that's impossible, correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Binger asked you about the charges that you currently have pending against you, correct?
Yes.
And those charges are a result of you providing the gun to my client.
Yes.
And each of those is punishable by 6 years in the Wisconsin State Prison, correct?
Yes.
And you're testifying here today, hoping that Mr. Binger will give you consideration on those charges and not send you to prison, correct?
Yes.
And you just,
Well, to be precise, Mr. Binger can't send him to prison. Mr. Binger can prosecute him, and a judge could send him to prison if he's found guilty.
Mr. Binger can make a recommendation of prison.
True. And yes,
Mr. Binger can make a recommendation of prison, correct?
Yes.
And you're hoping that by you testifying, he doesn't make a recommendation of prison, correct?
Yes.
Probation.
There's no really assuming what I get out of this.
There haven't been any promises made. I'm asking you what you're hoping.
I'm hoping for whatever the best is I get. I don't know what it is.
Okay. Your attorney, Mr. Cotton, he's met with you and Mr. Binger and the detectives?
Yes.
When's the last time you guys met?
I want to say a few days before this date.
You didn't meet today?
Well, I mean, yeah, we did meet today.
When's the last time before today? Last week sometime?
Yeah.
Okay. You're aware that I asked your attorney if you'd be willing to meet with me, correct?
No.
No? On August 26th of 2020, you were at the Antioch Police Department when Kyle turned himself in, correct?
Yes.
And you were interviewed in the early morning hours of August 26th by, I'm fine, Detective Antaranian.
Yes.
And he's the individual who's the second from closest to the jury, correct?
Yes.
You met with him for a little over an hour?
Yeah, it was well over an hour.
And that was when everything was fresh in your memory, correct?
Somewhat. I was very tired.
But it's
Yeah, it was
much
very-
nearer in time than it is today, correct?
Yes.
And you told him on that date, it was audio and videotaped, what you remember, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember talking to Detective Antaranian and telling him whose idea it was to go to Car Source to protect the property?
Yes.
Was it, I'm going to give you three choices, yours, Kyle's, or Nick Smith's?
Nick Smith's.
When you got to Car Source, after you'd stopped at Jelinski's, you meet with Nick Smith?
Yes.
And you knew that Nick had worked at Car Source?
Yeah.
And he introduced you guys to Sam and to his brother.
I wouldn't say introduced. We had met Sam previously that day, but his brother we had not met. Sir, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit Defendants 30. Can you tell me what that is? This is the second location we went to when Sam, I don't remember if it was Sam or his brother, had given us a ride, me, Kyle, and Nick, to the location that would be more north. And that's where we met up with a lot of people that we really didn't know.
Okay, that would be Car Source at 63rd and Sheridan.
The one right down here.
Right here.
Yes.
Sheridan and 63rd.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
The far right of that photograph, who is that depicted in the photo?
The far right?
Far left, where I'm pointing, I'm sorry.
The co-owner of Car Source?
So is that Sam or is that his brother?
I believe that's his brother.
Okay. Where are you in this picture?
The far right.
The far right?
Yes.
Who's standing next to you?
Kyle.
And what's in front of Kyle's feet?
A first aid box?
Okay, that's a first aid box that is different from his first aid pack that he wears on his side, correct?
Yes.
Where is Nick Smith in this photograph?
He is two people to the left of Kyle wearing the white hat.
Okay, so he's got a white hat with a cross on it? Yes?
Yes.
Now, you know the owner, you know Nick, and you know Kyle. Everybody else in that photograph, had you ever seen them before that day?
No.
Did you have any plan of ever meeting up with those individuals to help protect CarSource?
No.
They just came along when you were at CarSource and offered their services to help, correct?
Yes.
Does the name Ryan Balch mean anything to you?
Yes, it's somewhat clear.
Okay. And who is Ryan Balch today to you?
I never really got to meet him a whole lot. He is one of the people that showed up randomly or unexpectedly.
And you talk about you wanting to be on the roof, correct?
Yes.
You told Nick Smith you wanted Kyle to be on the roof, correct?
Yes.
And Nick Smith said, no, we wanted Kyle on the ground
Yes.
because he's a medic and he can provide services, correct?
Yes.
You saw Kyle fix somebody's hand who had a big gash in it.
Yes.
You saw him give aid to a woman who had been shot by a gas ball.
I'm unaware of that.
Okay. You saw Kyle going out with other individuals in that picture, Exhibit 30, and put out some fires, correct?
Yes.
And did you see anybody that evening starting any fires?
Plenty of people.
Plenty of people starting fires?
Yes.
Did you see the individuals who took the trailer from the lot of rubble, put it out in the street, and started on fire?
I did not see that.
You didn't watch that?
No.
Weren't paying attention?
I don't know if I don't remember or if I missed it.
Okay. What about the porta potty?
Yes, I saw that.
Okay. Describe that.
People were tipping over a porta potty and lighting it on fire.
Okay. And you can't, as you sit here today, say who did that, but you know what happened.
Yes.
Okay. And you don't know what Mr. Rosenbaum did or didn't do because you weren't paying attention to him.
Yes.
You don't know whether Mr. Rosenbaum, let me ask it this way, simpler. You know of nothing that happened down at the 63rd Street and Sheridan Road CarSource.
No.
Couldn't see it,
No.
even though you're on the roof.
Yep.
Now, I'll answer it this way. Kyle's phone records have you calling him and sending him down to CarSource 3. You don't dispute that, do you?
I don't remember it.
I'm not, if his phone records say he got a phone call from Nick Smith, you don't dispute that,
Not exactly, no.
okay? And the whole idea was to send Kyle down to CarSource 3, the 63rd Street CarSource, because you guys had received a report that the people who were supposed to be protecting it had left, correct?
Yes.
And the property was being destroyed.
Yes.
You didn't know that Kyle had been separated from Mr. Balch at that point.
I did not.
So you tell him to go down there and protect that property because the cars are being bashed in, correct?
Yes.
It was either you or Nick Smith.
Yes.
And from where you were, you could see Kyle going down in that direction.
Yes.
And it wasn't the second he goes down there you hear shots. He goes out of your view, there's a fairly lengthy period of time, you hear a gunshot, and then you hear a series of more gunshots, correct?
Yes.
And you, from where you were, could not see what happened to Kyle at the second incident, correct?
Yes.
Did not see.
I did not see.
And eventually, Kyle comes back in to your vision, correct?
Yes.
What did you observe Kyle doing as he approached? Well, let me ask you this. Where was he first?
Where I first saw him was kind of against a tree line. It was more in front of the Ultimate gas station. And I saw him walking with his gun hanging down and he had his hands up. And then I watched him walk up to a police car and then step away.
Okay.
And then
Describe what he's doing as he's going up to that police car.
I can't hear anything, but I could tell he was yelling.
Okay.
I don't know what he was yelling.
Where
but,
were his hands?
In the air.
Okay. And you saw him walk up to the police car.
Yes.
You don't hear anything, but does Kyle stay and go up to the car? What's his next movement?
He walks up to the car and very quickly he like jumps back.
Okay, like somebody told him to get back?
Yeah.
Because he walked up there voluntarily, correct?
Yes.
And then he quickly steps back.
Yes.
And he then makes his way back to car source number 2, correct?
Yes.
And he goes to that location, you guys meet up outside, you come down the ladder.
Yes, I come down the ladder. By the time I had got inside the building, he was already sitting in there.
Okay.
So they had to open the doors for him and let him in.
Okay. And you described him on August 25th, the morning of the 26th, I apologize, to Detective Antiramium as sweating like a pig. Do you remember using those words?
Yes.
White as a ghost
Yes.
and hysterical.
Yes.
He told you he shot somebody,
Yes.
told you he had to shoot somebody.
Yes.
It was self-defense.
Yes.
Hadn't met with a lawyer, correct?
Correct.
Hadn't talked with anybody about his story. He's telling you right that day what happened.
Yes.
And you don't want to take him to the Kenosha Police Department, correct?
Yes.
Why not?
It's impossible.
You can't get to it,
Yeah,
correct?
you can't.
And if you guys walked up there with guns, you'd be a target, correct?
Yeah.
And you agree to go home to Kyle's residence, and he'll turn himself into the police there.
Yes.
And he did turn himself into the police
Yes.
an hour and a half after you finally saw him at the car source, correct?
About that time, yes.
1:20 a.m. That's what the video shows. You don't dispute that.
No.
And you talk about discussions whether or not he should leave. That was his mother who was making those discussions, correct?
Yes.
Kyle wanted to turn himself in, correct?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And he did.
Yes, you did.
And eventually you were asked to come down to the police department, correct?
Yes.
And when you were asked to come down to the police department, you brought the guns.
No. The police had met us there at the apartment, and then they took them.
Okay. And then you drive then down to the police department
Yes.
with Kyle's 2 sisters.
Yes. No. Yeah. Yeah, I believe so.
And shortly after you get there, that's when that first interview happens with you, correct?
Yes.
And at that point, you are worried about the fact that you had given Kyle the gun, correct?
Yes.
And you talked to your girlfriend, his sister, at the police department and asked about coming up with a story to protect you regarding the guns, correct?
I do not remember that.
If she said it happened, you wouldn't disagree, correct?
I would disagree.
Okay. And Detective Antiramium asking you a question on the morning of the 26th. So when did you first see the gun? You. About when we were getting into the car, when we walked outside the house. Detective Antiramium. Okay. Did you talk to him about it at all? No. I had a lot of stuff on my mind. Do you remember that exchange?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing bad had happened at that point, correct?
Correct.
So what did you have on your mind that was interfering with you saying, hey, Kyle, don't take the gun?
Kind of scared to go down there, not knowing what to expect.
Just, you wanted Kyle to have the gun, correct?
That wasn't really an opinion in my mind at all.
You wanted a gun.
Personally, for myself, yes.
You had no objection or voiced no objection to Kyle, your brother, having the gun, correct?
It wasn't a thought in my mind.
Well, he walks out of the house with an AR-15, and you don't say boo, correct?
I didn't say anything, correct?
And you have the ability to speak.
Yes.
If you wanted to object, you could have said something to Kyle, correct?
Yes, I could have.
And you didn't,
No.
because you wanted him to have the gun for protection.
Not that reason exactly.
You wanted a gun for protection.
Yes.
This is a statement that you made to Detective Antaramian on the morning of the 26th. But that's what I knew of it. Basically, we go down there and we walk up, and it's coincidental. We walk up and there's Sam, and I'm like, oh, Sam, I just met you not long ago or whatever. And he gives Nick keys to the building and showed him where the ladder was, correct?
Yes.
You guys had permission to be there.
Yes.
He wanted you to protect his property.
Yes.
And he wanted protection at the 59th Street address and the 63rd Street address.
Yes.
And once you found out there wasn't any protection at the 63rd Street address, you sent Kyle down there, correct?
Yes.
And initially, Nick was acting like he was in control of everything, correct?
Yes.
And he was leading the people from the West Bend area who you didn't know, like he was even the owner of Car Source, correct?
Yes.
He wasn't, correct?
No.
Do you remember telling Detective Antaramian, the only person I saw actually help people was Kyle?
Yes.
Because he was, correct?
Yes.
He might not have been a trained EMT, but he was providing first aid.
Yes.
And that big orange box in Exhibit 30 that I showed you, that was the stuff he brought from either his house or his employment, correct?
I'm not too sure where that came from, if I'm being honest.
Do you remember telling Detective Antaramian, the only person I saw actually help people was Kyle?
Yes.
Because he was, correct?
Yes.
He might not have been a trained EMT, but he was providing first aid.
Yes.
And that big orange box in Exhibit 30 that I showed you, that was the stuff he brought from either his house or his employment, correct?
I'm not too sure where that came from, if I'm being honest.
Water bottle, and then poof. Detective Antaramian, what hurt? Did the bottle hit you? You. No. It was actually, I was on the roof, but the wind was blowing towards me, so it was a bunch of just like a tear gas bomb. Just a bunch of smoke in the air. It came towards me, and my eyes started to burn. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So they were throwing gas bombs at you on the roof.
Yes.
There were gas bombs on the ground.
Yes.
Now, do you remember talking to Detective Antaramian about somebody on the roof who was upsetting you because he was taking a laser pointer, not on a gun, but a laser pointer and pointing it at people?
Yes, I do remember.
Okay, that wasn't Kyle, correct? Because he was never on the roof.
Correct.
Now, who was that?
One of the people that came from out of town, he was about in mid-30s, I want to say mid-40s. He was on the...
Is he depicted in Exhibit 30? If you have to walk closer, go ahead.
I don't think I see him. No, I don't believe so.
But it was a laser pointer, and the individual would point to demonstrators, rioters, correct?
Yes.
That upset them
Yes.
because it was pointing them out,
Yes.
and it also upset them because they could have thought it was a weapon.
Yes.
And you told him to stop,
Yes.
and he just kept laughing about it.
Yes.
Detective Antaramian asking you on the 26th, okay, anyone have inaudible? Kyle, he disappears out of view. You. Nick somehow finds out that there's nobody there, and there's people trying to break cars. And he tells Kyle and the other dude that he was on the ground with to go over there. So did he tell him this in person or on the phone? Phone. Do you remember that?
It was on the phone.
But you're not sure who called.
Yes, I'm not sure.
Later on in that same interview, you speaking. He was actually on the roof at that point. Nick kept on going up and down, up and down. He called Kyle. Before he called Kyle, he told me, like, there's nobody there. They're trying to set cars on fire. I was like, oh crap, oh crap. And he called Kyle and he tells him, and then Kyle starts running and he bolts for it. Do you remember telling the detective that?
Yes, no, I do.
And you stated you saw him run from the gas station, correct?
Yes.
Could you see the fire extinguisher in his hands?
Yes.
Because you're only, if you're on the roof of the car source number 2, you're like 1 block from 60, not 1 block, less than a half a block from 60th and Sheridan Road, correct?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
You had a clear line of sight directly to the ultimate gas station.
Yes.
Detective Howard, to you on the 26th. What makes Ryan supposed to be with Kyle? Why do you say that? I wouldn't say supposed to, but they were with each other the entire night. Every time Kyle left, so did he. So they were always together.
Yes.
And when they're going out to provide medical attention to people, they're going out with the buddy system. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's fair.
And when Kyle would go out and put out fires that were going on, he would go with somebody else, the buddy system, correct?
Yes.
There was a time where he left with the female Joanne Fiedler with the white helmet and went and put out a fire by the church. Do you remember that?
I believe so.
And you stated, so I figured they wanted to team up and go out and help people,
Yes.
telling the detective. This is Detective Antaramian questioning you on the 26th, asking you if you remember this. Okay, so then at some point you guys, so I mean, I guess, and I'm not trying to make you look worse, but I want to make sure I'm factually accurate here. I mean, the fact that he buys this sling for his gun, it's likely he's going out to take it with him that night. Well, the intent was to buy a sling for me. Do you remember that exchange?
I do not.
But even Detective Antaramian questioned you about the sling and the timing of it, correct?
Yes.
And how hard was it to attach those slings?
I don't really recall.
Do you remember the detectives wanting your telephone?
My phone?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe so.
Didn't they talk to you? And I'm reading from Detective Howard at that same interview. So we're just going to apply for a search warrant. But absolutely, as it's laid out in that form, you have the right to refuse. Dominic Black. Okay, so I'm not understanding as far as what I believe. I believe I'm going to be here for a while. Okay? And I have not talked to the authorities yet, so I don't know. Do you remember the discussion about that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and they wanted to download your phone, correct?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And eventually you said to him, fine, you can download my phone, I don't have anything to hide.
Yes.
Now, yeah. And that interview regarding the incident regarding your phone, and I'm sorry if I misled you, that was the November 6th incident, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and at that point, you were already under arrest.
Yes.
And the detective both detectives interviewed you that night.
Yes.
And when you were in that interview, as it was wrapping up, they told you to have your lawyer, who was a different lawyer than Mr. Cotton at the time, reach out to Mr. Binger. He needed to talk to him about working something out.
Yes.
Okay? And from that day, they wanted you as a witness, correct?
I wouldn't necessarily say from that day, no.
Okay? Your trial on your charges was set back in September, correct?
I don't exactly recall.
Let me ask it this way, not trying to trip you up on dates. Your trial on these charges, which Mr. Binger is prosecuting you for, was before today,
Yes.
okay? About a month and a half ago?
Yes.
Okay. And you, your lawyer, and Mr. Binger walked into this courtroom and asked that the matter be set over until January of 2022,
Yes.
after you testified here today, correct?
Yes.
Before August 25th, 2020, that gun that Kyle Rittenhouse possessed on the night in question had never left the state of Wisconsin, correct?
Correct.
And you guys had the gun and you took it to Illinois so he could turn himself into the police.
Yes.
And you and Kyle did the taking off graffiti, correct?
Yes.
And that was in the late morning, right around lunchtime of the 25th, correct?
Correct.
And in that photograph is you, your stepfather, and your girlfriend, Mackenzie, correct?
Which photograph?
The photograph of this photograph right here.
My stepfather isn't in that picture.
He's not in that one?
No, it'd be my brother, and then Kyle and Mackenzie.
Okay, so you are where?
That might have been when I left to go get like the sandpaper.
Okay. And Kyle's wearing the olive green shirt with his hat turned backwards?
Yes.
And who's that standing next to him?
Mackenzie?
Okay, and you guys had spent the night before at your dad's house, correct?
I'm not aware of where he slept. I don't really remember.
Could have slept at your house?
He could have.
Okay. And Mackenzie slept at your house that night.
I'm not aware. I can't remember.
Do you remember watching live streams of the riots?
No, I do not.
Did your dad talk to you about the riots and that's the reason he got the guns out?
He did previously that night, yes.
Do you remember him talking to you as you told the detectives that there was a plan to board up the windows if the rioters came?
Yes.
Okay, so all that was going on, you're aware of it.
Yes.
And when you guys are target shooting up north, there was nothing strange about that, correct?
No.
Kyle handled the gun appropriately,
Yes.
and he shot at those small little, you're saying clay pigeons,
Yes.
about 4 inches in diameter?
Yep.
You shot at the same things?
Yes.
Nothing out of the ordinary?
No.
I have nothing further, sir. Thank you.
Redirect.
I want to pick up where that left off there. It sounds like there was a plan with your father to have the guns available, board up windows to protect the house that you live in. Is that right?
Yes.
But you decided on the night of the 25th to leave home and go downtown to protect car source. Is that right?
Yes.
Why didn't you stay home? Protect your house.
The riots had been going on for a while. The house had been ready to be boarded up. All the guns have been out for, I want to say, ever since the riots started, and nothing happened. I felt that the house would be safe.
The timing of all this, if I understand you correctly, is on Tuesday afternoon, late afternoon, 4 o'clock or so about, is when you and the defendant take the guns from your house and come downtown.
Yes.
Is that about right?
Yes.
You were somehow aware of stuff that had happened on Monday night and on Sunday night, right?
Yes.
That's part of the reason why you went downtown.
Yes.
But you decided at 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon there was no danger to your house that night?
I mean, I kind of figured, it's not just me that would be staying at the house. I have a lot of brothers that live there. It wasn't entirely my responsibility to make sure that the house was safe. I felt that it was safe. Nobody was going to harm the house. Nothing in the area had happened.
Okay. On this particular evening, when you're at the car source at 59th and you're up on the roof, where was Nick Smith during that evening?
He was up and down. So he was on the ground, he was on the roof, he was inside the building.
Did he ever have a gun that night?
I believe so. To the best of my memory, I think he did.
Do you remember if he had it the whole evening or just a short period of time?
I don't remember.
Is it fair to say that Nick Smith stayed at that location physically the whole night?
Yes.
And you did too?
Yes.
You've been asked by me, you've been asked by Attorney Richards, several variations of the same question, and I don't know that I think we've gotten some...
Don't comment on the witness's answer.
Who told the defendant to go to 63rd Street Car Source?
I'm not 100% certain.
At any point that evening, did you personally receive information from any other person that there were problems at the 63rd Street Car Source?
The only person I figured that out from was Nick Smith.
Do you know where he got that information?
I do not.
To your knowledge, did he physically ever go down to 63rd Street after you got to 59th, when you finally got all set up? Did he ever leave later in the evening to go check and see what was happening at 63rd Street Car Source in person?
No.
You said at some point in the evening someone up on the roof was using a laser pointer to aim at the crowd. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we're talking about something like this, shining it on a person. Is that right?
Yes, but a lot bigger.
Okay. Was it your understanding that the people who had this pointed at him felt like that was a gun
Yes.
pointed at him? You're telling us that it wasn't actually a gun, but the people on the ground thought it was.
Yes.
And you were upset by that.
Yes.
Why?
Because he shouldn't be doing that. There's no reason for it. And it's drawing attention towards us.
Did you feel that it wasn't appropriate for anyone on the roof or on the ground to be pointing a gun at anyone?
No, I didn't really feel like that was necessary at all.
Maybe I misstated my question. Let me just make sure I'm clear on that. Would you agree with me that it was not appropriate for the members in your group to be pointing their guns at people?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned earlier, when I was asking you questions, that someone was throwing rocks. You said in response to Mr. Richards' questions that someone was throwing some sort of water bottle or gas bomb up on the roof. Is that right?
Yes.
When these folks were doing these things to you and the other members of your group, did you point a gun at anyone?
No.
Did you fire at anyone?
No.
Why not?
Because there's no need to.
Did you feel that by these people throwing rocks at you or throwing a gas bomb at you, that you were in danger?
Pain, yes, but not danger. I knew it wasn't going to kill me.
So you felt like it wasn't enough to use deadly force?
Correct.
You were asked some questions about the discussions that you and I have had during the lead up to this case. Have I ever put any words in your mouth?
No.
What was the number one rule that I told you that I wanted from you when you testified?
Nothing but the truth.
Final question I have for you. Those slings, you were asked about how hard those slings were to attach to your body, and I forget, what did you say about that?
I don't truly remember.
Once they were attached to your body, did they hold that gun sort of dangling in front of you?
Yes.
Could we show that photograph of them? I think it's number 30, the one you just used. Okay. Yeah, I'll hold it. That's okay. I'm going to show you, Mr. May I approach your Honor? I've got this photograph that you've already seen. It's exhibit number 30, and it's showing you and the other individuals at the 63rd Street car source. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you wearing the sling in that photograph?
Yes, it appears.
And is that sling holding that gun in the front portion of your body?
Yes.
Does the defendant have his sling on with his gun being held similar to you?
Yes.
Was that sling strong enough to hold the weight of that gun?
Yes.
Was that sling strong enough so that if someone tried to pull that gun away, the gun would be held to your body?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Can you redirect, or recross rather?
I would move exhibit 30 into evidence.
Is there an objection?
No.
Received. You may step down, sir. Let's take a break. Let's aim for about 20 after. Please don't talk about the case during the break.
list dedicated to circulating exhibits, motions, or other written materials that members might want to offer as part of our hearing today. If you would like to submit materials, please send them to the email address that has been previously distributed to your offices, and we will circulate the materials to members and staff as quickly as we can. I would also remind all members that guidance from the Office of Attending Physician states that face coverings are required for all meetings in an enclosed space, such as committee hearings, except when you are recognized to speak. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for appearing before our committee today. When the Department of Justice performs as it should, it is a champion of the Bill of Rights, the protector of the rule of law, and the cornerstone of the institutions that make up our republic. As Attorney General, you have the responsibility to keep the department functioning at this high level, preserving the Constitution for our children and our children's children. You have assumed this enormous responsibility at a crossroads in our nation's history. For 4 years, the democratic institutions that you have sworn to protect, first as a judge and now as Attorney General, were deeply undermined by the former president and his political enablers. During that time, the Trump administration leveraged the department to protect the president and his friends and to punish his enemies, both real and imagined. And when the former president lost the last election, he summoned the top law enforcement officers in the country and demanded that they use the full power of the federal government to install him for another term. Trump's plan failed, at least in part because at least some department officials refused to help him overturn the election. Even now, however, the ex-president and his allies continue to cast doubt on the last election and appear to be drafting a plan to overturn the next one. And next time, we may not be so lucky. Your task as Attorney General is unenviable, Judge Garland, because you must build back everything DOJ lost under the last administration: its self-confidence, its reputation in the eyes of the American people, and an institutional respect for our Constitution and the rule of law. And it is not enough just to right the ship. As the chief law enforcement officer of our nation, it is also your responsibility to help the country understand and reckon with the violence and the lawlessness of the last administration while maintaining the department's prosecutorial independence. On January 6th, insurgents stormed the Capitol building in what appears to be a pre-planned, organized assault on our government, seeking to overturn the votes of their fellow Americans and believing in the lie told them by President Trump and his followers. I commend the department for doing the important work of bringing those responsible for the violence of January 6th to justice. I ask only that you continue to follow the facts and the law where they lead, because although you have rightly brought hundreds of charges against those who physically trespassed in the Capitol, the evidence suggests that you will soon have some hard decisions to make about those who organized and incited the attack in the first place. And we must acknowledge the simple truth that none of the individuals who attacked the Capitol that day appeared out of thin air. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, membership in white nationalist groups grew 55% during the Trump presidency. Membership in hate groups overall remains historically high. The COVID-19 epidemic, as with many national crises, brought out both the best and the worst of our fellow Americans. While everyday heroes struggle to save lives and keep people safe, anti-Asian hate crimes and hate incidents skyrocketed. Innocent people lost their lives and communities were shadowed. I know DOJ and its components are key to the Biden administration's national strategy for countering violent extremism, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about how DOJ is working to prevent violent extremists from gaining further foothold in our country. This growth in extremist ideologies echoed in an epidemic of violence and intimidation directed at our healthcare professionals, teachers, essential workers, school board members, and election workers. To be clear, we are a country that prizes democratic involvement at every level of government. The right to be heard, to have a voice, is guaranteed by the Constitution. But nobody has a right to threaten his or her fellow citizens with violence. You were absolutely right to ask the FBI and federal prosecutors to meet with local law enforcement agencies and set up dedicated lines of communication so that we can confront this spike in violence head on. There's a broader pattern here. In each of these cases, Former President Trump's big lie, the rise in hate crimes against citizens of Asian descent, and the growing threats of violence against public servants, the same set of individuals have leveraged the same sorts of misinformation, stoked the same sorts of grievances, and shown remarkably little interest in solving our problems. But this country, and your tenure as Attorney General, cannot be defined only by the outrages of the last 4 years. We have much more to do to deliver on our nation's fundamental promise of liberty and justice for all. Black and brown Americans deserve to live in a country where they can trust that their local police departments will protect, not endanger, their families. I applaud you for taking steps to limit the use of chokeholds and no-knock warrants, and we must continue to work together to address the issues that allow for our criminal justice system to so disproportionately impact people of color. Across the country, state legislatures are restricting the right to vote in service of the most cynical political motives. Your department has rightly stepped in to secure our next election, and Congress owes you a Voting Rights Restoration Act that will give you the tools you need to consign these nakedly undemocratic efforts to the dustbin of history where they belong. Similarly, Texas' law to ban abortion after 6 weeks and punish abortion providers is designed to restrict its citizens' constitutionally protected rights. It does so by offering to pay a bounty to those who would turn in their neighbors, co-workers, or even strangers if they suspect someone violated the law or helped a woman get an abortion after 6 weeks. This deliberately creates an atmosphere of fear and suspicion that stops women from seeking help. It is a dangerous law that is repugnant to the Constitution, and I thank you for the Department's swift action to protect these essential rights. We cannot become a country where only some people in some states enjoy their constitutional rights. As Attorney General, you have the power to help our country navigate the generational trauma of oppression and move past the challenges of the last 4 years. Thank you again for appearing before us today. I look forward to your testimony. I now recognize the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chairman just said the Trump DOJ was political and went after their opponents. Are you kidding me? 3 weeks ago, the National School Board Association writes President Biden asking him to involve the FBI in local school board matters. 5 days later, the Attorney General of the United States does just that, does exactly what a political organization asked to be done. 5 days. We've sent, Republicans on this committee have sent the Attorney General 13 letters in the last 6 months. It takes weeks and months to get a response. 8 of the letters, we've got nothing. They just gave us the finger, said, we're not going to get back to you. And all our letters were actually sent to the Attorney General. Here's a letter sent to someone else asking for a specific thing to be done, and in 5 days, the Attorney General does it. Here's what the October 4th memo said. Quote, I'm directing the FBI to convene meetings with local leaders. These meetings will open dedicated lines of communication for threat reporting. Dedicated lines of communication for threat reporting. A snitch line on parents started 5 days after a left-wing political organization asked for it. That's not political. I don't know what is. Where's the dedicated lines of communication with local leaders regarding our southern border? Something that, frankly, is a federal matter. Where's the dedicated lines of communication on violent crime in our cities? Violent crime that has went up in every major urban area where Democrats have defunded the police. Nope, can't do that. Can't do that. The Biden Justice Department is going to go after parents who object to some racist, hate America curriculum. Nope, can't focus on the southern border where 1.7 million illegal encounters have happened this year alone. A record number. MS-13 can just waltz right across the border, but the Department of Justice, they're going to open up a snitch line on parents. Think about this. The same FBI that Mr. Garland is directing to open dedicated lines of communication for reporting on parents just a few years ago spied on 4 American citizens associated with President Trump's campaign. Clinton campaign hired Perkins Coie, who hired Fusion GPS, who hired Christopher Steele, who put a bunch of garbage together, gave it to the FBI. They used that as the basis to open up an investigation into a presidential campaign. Oh, and then there was Mr. Zussman. Mr. Zussman, who worked at Perkins Coie, the firm hired by the Clinton campaign. He cut out all the middlemen. He just said, I'm just going to go directly to the FBI, and not just anyone at the FBI. Who'd he go to? Jim Baker, the chief counsel at the FBI, handed him a bunch of false information, told him false information, and of course, he's been indicted by the special counsel. A few weeks ago, the IG at the Department of Justice released a report that found that the FBI made over 200 errors, omissions, and lies in just 29 randomly selected FISA applications. But don't worry, the Attorney General of the United States just put them in charge of a dedicated line of communication to report on parents who attend school board meetings. Mr. Chairman, Americans are afraid. For the first time during my years in public office, first time, I talked to the good folks I get the privilege of representing in the 4th District of Ohio, folks all around the country. They tell me for the first time they fear their government. And frankly, I think it's obvious why. Every single liberty we enjoy under the First Amendment has been assaulted over the last year. Stop and think about it. Americans were told you couldn't go to church, couldn't go to work, couldn't go to school. Small business owners were told you're not an essential business, close your doors, causing many of them to go bankrupt. We were given curfews, stay-at-home orders. Last fall in Ohio, you had to be in your home at 10. In Pennsylvania, when you were in your home, you had to wear a mask. In Vermont, when you were in your home, you didn't have to wear a mask because you weren't allowed to have friends and family over. And of course, there's always a double standard with these folks. Folks who make the rules never seem to follow them. And now the Biden administration says get a vaccine or lose your job. Even if you've had COVID and have natural immunity, get a vaccine or you will lose your job. Oh, I almost forgot. The Biden administration also wants another dedicated line of communication for reporting. They want a second snitch line. They want banks to report on every single transaction over $600 for every single American to the IRS. The IRS, that agency with its stellar record of customer service, the IRS, you know, the same IRS that targeted conservatives the last time Joe Biden was in the executive branch. Jefferson said once, tyranny is when the people fear the government. We're there. Sadly, we are there, but I don't think the good people of this great country are going to cower and hide. I think your memo, Mr. Attorney General, was the last straw. I think it was the catalyst for a great awakening that is just getting started. Pilots at Southwest Airlines, the Chicago Police Union, parents at school board meetings, Americans are pushing back because Americans value freedom. A few weeks ago, Terry McAuliffe said this, I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. When government tells parents we're smarter than you, Americans aren't going to tolerate it. When the Attorney General of the United States sets up a snitch line on parents, Americans aren't going to tolerate it. I think they're going to stand up to this accelerated march to communism that we now see. America's going to fight the good fight. They're going to finish the course. They're going to keep the faith because Americans value freedom. Mr. Chairman, we have a video we'd like to play.
Mr. Chairman.
We have a video we'd like to play.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Dean,
I
what
object.
purpose does Ms. Dean seek recognition?
I object. I'm reserving my right to object to the video.
Why would
May I
you-
inquire as to whether the gentleman has followed the Judiciary Committee's AV protocol by providing 48 hours notice to the committee's clerk that he was going to use a video?
We provided notice. Well, first of all, there's no 48-hour rule. It's not in the committee rules. Second, we did let the committee staff, the majority, know that we had a video, and we gave the video to him this morning.
Responding to the gentlelady's request, he did not. He did not supply the 48 hours rule. 48 hours notice required by the rule.
Mr. Chairman,
Then I insist on my objection. Having failed to follow the bipartisan protocol, I insist on my objection.
An objection has been heard. The video will not be shown.
I appeal the ruling of the chair.
Appealing-
ruling has been made, there's been an objection.
There's been no ruling that was made. There's been no ruling that's
Chairman,
been
I
made.
wish
There's been an objection.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak regarding
No, that's out of order. This is not debatable.
well, what's out of order is there is no rule that requires a 48-hour notice. That's what's out of order.
There is such a rule.
There is not in our rules.
Mr. Chairman, what are you afraid of?
There is such a rule. You objected last year. You were told there was such a rule.
Mr. Chairman, what are our colleagues on the other side of the aisle afraid of? Are they afraid of videos of parents?
The gentleman was recognized for his opening statement. Is he finished
the
with his
ruling in the
opening
chair.
statement?
I'm not finished with my opening.
I seek recognition for a
Gentleman
parliamentary
should
inquiry.
proceed with his opening statement.
It's not a rule. It's what you said. I think the term you used is it's protocol.
The gentlewoman
Rules don't govern
objected.
the conduct of the committee. Rules do. That's not a rule. We had a video. We understood you had a video.
I seek recognition for a parliamentary inquiry.
Gentlewoman objected because you failed to follow the rule. Her objection is sustained.
Mr. Chairman, I seek
Does the gentleman have anything else?
I seek
We had a
recognition for a parliamentary inquiry.
We had. Yeah, but I'll yield back in just a second, and particularly if you're going to recognize
Gentleman
Mr.
yields back?
No, I haven't yielded back yet. I said I will in a second. It's a video about parents at school board meetings, moms and dads speaking at school board meetings, and you guys aren't going to let us play it?
It will not be, an objection has been heard that you failed to give the 48 hours required by the rule, and therefore
What
will not
rule?
be heard.
Mr. Chairman, what rule?
You have to cite the
Parliamentary
rule.
inquiry, what rule? Please present the rule.
In the case of audio-visual materials under the leadership of my predecessor, Chairman Goodlatte, a Republican, the committee developed a written protocol for managing the use of audio-visual materials in our hearings.
Written protocol.
This protocol simply requires members to provide 48 hours notice they are going to use audio-visual materials. Until recently, this protocol was not controversial. It was a helpful tool we used to manage hearings and make sure videos played properly. The gentlewoman has objected to the materials because the gentleman did not provide the agreed-upon 48 hours notice. Playing audio-visual materials during a committee hearing is the equivalent of introducing printed materials into the hearing record. In the normal course of business, we do not object to each other's requests, but members have the right to object if they so choose, and an objection has been heard.
Mr. Chairman, did we ever vote on that?
That's a clever written statement, but a
Gentleman was recognized
protocol
for
is
his
not a
opening
rule.
statement.
Mr. Chairman, obviously you're not going to let us play it. Obviously you're going to censor us, which is sort of the conduct of the left today, it seems, and Democrats today, it seems. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. A point of order. Gentleman will state his point of order. That is not a point of order, as I said before. Playing audiovisual materials during a committee hearing is the equivalent of introducing printed materials into the hearing record. In the normal course of business, we do not object to each other's requests, but members have the right to object if they so choose, and an objection has been heard.
That's not a valid point. The gentleman has not made a valid
The
point.
gentleman has not made a valid point of order.
Now we recognize that.
The gentleman.
Move the table. Move the table.
There's nothing to appeal. There's been no ruling. There's been no ruling.
There's just been an objection.
There's just been an objection, and the objection has been heard.
So now we'll introduce the Attorney General.
Now we'll introduce the Attorney General. I will now introduce today's witness. Merrick Garland was sworn in as the 86th Attorney General of the United States on March 11th, 2021. Immediately preceding his confirmation as Attorney General, Mr. Garland was a judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. He was appointed to that position in 1997, served as Chief Judge of the Circuit from 2013 to 2020, and served as Chair of the Executive Committee of the Judicial Conference of the United States from 2017 until 2020. In 2016, President Obama nominated him for the position of Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Before becoming a federal judge, Attorney General Garland spent a substantial part of his professional life at the Department of Justice, including as Special Assistant to the Attorney General, Assistant United States Attorney, Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Criminal Division, and Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General. Earlier in his career, Attorney General Garland was in private practice, and he also taught at Harvard Law School. He earned both his undergraduate and law degrees from Harvard University. Following law school, he clerked for Judge Henry Friendly of the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit and for Supreme Court Justice William Brennan. We welcome the Attorney General, and we thank him for participating today. Now, if you'd please rise, I will begin by swearing you in. raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct, to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated. Please note that your written statement will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, I ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. To help you stay within that time limit, there's a timing light on your table. When the light switches from green to yellow, you have 1 minute to conclude your testimony. When the light turns red, it signals your 5 minutes have expired. Attorney General Garland, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Gordon, distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. In my address to all Justice Department employees on my first day in office, I spoke about 3 co-equal priorities that should guide the department's work: upholding the rule of law, keeping our country safe, and protecting civil rights. The first core priority, upholding the rule of law, is rooted in the recognition that to succeed and retain the trust of the American people, the Justice Department must adhere to the norms that have been part of its DNA since Edward Levy's tenure as the first post-Watergate Attorney General. Those norms of independence from improper influence, of the principled exercise of discretion, and of treating like cases alike define who we are as public servants. Over the past 7 months that I have served as Attorney General, the Department has reaffirmed and, where appropriate, updated and strengthened policies that are foundational for these norms. For example, we strengthened our policy governing communications between the Justice Department and the White House. That policy is designed to protect the Department's criminal and civil law enforcement decisions and its legal judgments from partisan or other inappropriate influence.